Culture is one of the fundamental elements of social life and a very important topic in sociology. Many of the concepts presented here will come up again in almost every subsequent unit. You're going to need to keep these concepts in mind as you learn about other substantive areas of sociology. And you'll also want to think about how culture is relevant to the things you already know from your own life experience. Try to come up with some of your own examples as you listen and learn. The subject of culture is inherently interesting to most people, but although culture is familiar to all of us, you should be seeing it in a new and different way by the time you finish this unit. Culture encompasses practically all of human civilization and touches on almost every aspect of social life. It is so much a part of the world around us that we may not recognize the extent to which it shapes and defines who we are. In the broadest sense, we can say that culture is the entire way of life of a group of people. It can include everything from language and gestures to style of dress and standards of beauty, from customs and rituals to tools and artifacts, from music and child-rearing practices to the proper way for customers to line up in a grocery store. It forms basic beliefs and assumptions about the world and the way things work, and it defines the moral parameters of what is right and wrong, good and bad. Although culture varies from group to group, all societies develop some form of culture. It's the human equivalent of instinct in animals. Although we humans do have some basic instincts, culture actually accounts for our great success as a species. We are totally dependent on it to deal with the demands of life in society. As culture develops, it is shared among members of a group, handed down from generation to generation, and passed along from one group or individual to another. Although culture may seem to us to be second nature, it is actually learned rather than innate. Because we learn it so slowly and incrementally, we are often unaware of the process. For instance, few of us would be conscious of having learned all the slang words we currently use or the distance we typically maintain from others while talking with them. We may not remember exactly when we first felt patriotic or how we formed our opinions about people in the upper class. We all carry culture inside ourselves. It becomes ingrained and internalized into our way of thinking and acting. Culture guides the way we make sense of the world around us and the way we make decisions about what to do and how to do it. We can talk about the culture of a given country, state, or community, of people belonging to an ethnic or religious group, or of those working in the same profession. We can even say that sports enthusiasts, schoolmates, or a clique of friends all share in common a culture. And we'll discuss some of these cultural variations later in the unit. People study culture in a variety of ways. Theologians and philosophers, for example, might debate the morals and values of an ideal culture. Art, literature, and film scholars focus on certain aspects of culture, novels, films, paintings, plays, as expressive, symbolic activities. Cultural anthropologists often investigate societies outside the United States, traveling around the world, engaging in empirical fieldwork, while archaeologists study the cultures of the past, digging for artifacts that document the historical realities of peoples long dead. In contrast, sociologists usually focus on culture closer to home, often in the same societies to which they belong. At the same time, however, sociologists may also engage in the process of othering by studying the unusual, extraordinary, or deviant in cultural groups. In so doing, they may fail to consider some aspects of the culture that is right in front of them. This is where the sociology of everyday life offers certain benefits. By studying the mundane as well as the exceptional, we can learn about culture in all of its interesting permutations. We can learn not only about the differences between cultural groups, us and them, but also about the similarities. Culture acts as a lens through which we view the world. That lens, however, can either elucidate or obscure what we're looking at. Often we can't clearly see our own culture, precisely because we are so familiar with it. Yet, when exposed to another culture through travel, television, or other means, we can readily see what is different or seemingly exotic. Rarely does our perspective allow us to recognize the strangeness in our own culture. One of the best examples of the challenges in observing culture is presented in the famous article by Horace Minor titled Body Ritual Among the Nagarema. The article focuses on the beliefs and practices of this North American people concerning the care of their bodies. Miner observes that their fundamental belief appears to be that the human body is ugly and is susceptible to decay and disease, and that the only way to counter these conditions is to engage in elaborate ceremonies and rituals. All members of the Nakarema culture conform to a greater or lesser degree to these practices and then pass them along to their children. The Nakarema regularly visit medicine men, holy mouth men, and other specialized practitioners from whom they procure magical potions. Do the Nakarema seem like a strange group of people, or are they somehow familiar? Miner writes as though he were an anthropologist studying some exotic tribe of a primitive people. But in actuality, the passages describe the bathroom and personal care habits of the average American. He doesn't embellish or make up anything. He merely approaches the topic as if he knows nothing about its meaning. So the charm box is a medicine cabinet, the holy water font is a sink, and the medicine men and holy mouth men are doctors and dentists, and the exotic mouth rite is just the practice of brushing your teeth. One of the reasons that Miner's article has become so popular is that it demonstrates how easy it is to fail to see your own culture, precisely because we take it for granted. The article reminds us who are becoming social analysts how useful culture shock is in helping to see even what is most familiar as bizarre or strange. Throughout this unit, keep in mind that your powers of observation must be applied to looking at both them and us. Another related problem arises when trying to understand cultures other than our own. Generally, we think of our own cultures as being the normal one, a belief that's known as ethnocentrism. We don't realize that culture is something learned and that there's nothing inherently better about ours. Ethnocentrism means that we use our own culture as a kind of measuring stick with which to judge other individuals or societies. Anyone outside our group seems off-center or abnormal. While ethnocentrism may give us a sense of pride in our own group, it can also prevent us from seeing and understanding others. In some cases, ethnocentrism can be a source of prejudice and hostility. As sociologists, we have to have as clear a view as any society as possible, and this requires that we suspend, at least temporarily, our ethnocentrism. And there are several ways to do this. In the first unit, we learned about the beginner's mind, culture shock, and the sociological imagination, all ways to see the world anew. And we can add to that list cultural relativism, which means seeing each different culture as simply that, different. Not better or worse, not right or wrong, but on its own terms. Doing so helps us place different values, beliefs, norms, and practices within their own cultural context. By practicing cultural relativism or being culturally sensitive, we begin to see others more clearly and without judgment, and therefore to appreciate their way of life. We can discover viewpoints and interpretations of reality different from our own. Cultural relativism becomes all the more important in our increasingly diverse society.